My name is Colton Thatcher, 19 years old, from rural Wayne County, Utah, near the Fremont River. They buried my uncle without a body, without a goodbye, and way too fast. I was 17, and something about it never sat right. Weeks later, I found his lighter hidden in a tree on our land. That's when I knew. Wade didn't drown. He disappeared. And someone in my own family helped him. Now I'm digging up a truth they buried deeper than the grave. Before we dive into this chilling story of betrayal, deception, and a fake death that nearly tore my family apart, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the truth hiding behind the next story. Now, let me tell you how I uncovered a secret my family buried. And why I'll never see them the same again. They said my Uncle Wade slipped on the rocks and hit his head. The current took him before anyone could do a damn thing about it. That's what the sheriff said. That's what the obituary printed. That's what my dad, Earl, kept repeating, like if he said it enough, I'd believe it too. But I didn't. I stood there at the graveside, 17 years old and sweating in my only black shirt, watching as they lowered a closed casket into the dusty red earth of Wayne County. Fremont River was barely a mile east, its muddy voice whispering through cottonwoods like it had secrets to tell. And maybe it did, because here's the thing: Wade Thatcher didn't drown. Not in that river. Not anywhere. I knew that man better than most. Wade taught me how to gut a trout when I was 8, how to shoot a rifle by 9, and how to play poker by 10. He was slick, loud, stubborn as hell, and more alive than anyone I'd ever met. The kind of man who could make a lie sound like gospel and gospel sound like a joke. He'd swum across Fremont 100 times. Drunk, high, hell, even with a dislocated shoulder once. He wasn't afraid of water. And he never fished alone, except that day. Apparently, they said he went out before dawn, didn't tell anyone, and his truck was found parked near the river bend just past mile marker 6. Rod and tackle box in the cab. Waders hanging from a nearby branch. No body. Just a hat snagged on a branch and some blood on a rock. I remember staring into that casket, thinking, if they won't let us see his face, how do we know he's even in there? No one questioned it. Not my cousins. Not my mom. And especially not my dad. Earl just kept saying, he's gone, Colton. It's time to move on. But he couldn't look me in the eye when he said it. Not once, Mama cried, but not like someone who lost her little brother. More like someone afraid of what might come next. 3 days after the funeral, Wade's name vanished from everything. His truck? Sold. His tools? Split up between neighbors. His debts? Quietly forgiven by people who used to curse his name. Too neat. Too fast. And me? I couldn't stop thinking about how his Zippo brass, dented, with a little Mormon temple etched in the corner, wasn't in his pocket when they found his gear. He carried that lighter everywhere. Said it'd survive the apocalypse. Even if he didn't, I didn't cry at the funeral, not because I wasn't sad. Because I was angry, because I knew deep in my gut, where truth hides from politeness, that Wade Thatcher wasn't buried in that box, and if he wasn't dead, then someone was lying, and I was going to find out who. 3 weeks after the funeral, the nights got colder, and the talk of Wade dried up like the riverbanks. Folks around town moved on like he was just a chapter in an old book. Even at home, Mama stopped lighting the candles she used to burn in his memory. Dad stopped mentioning him altogether, but I didn't stop looking. That morning, I was fixing the far fence line where the mule deer like to push through, out past the cottonwoods that edge the east pasture. It was quiet, just the creak of barbed wire, the moan of the wind, and the steady crunch of my boots on dry dirt. That's when I saw it, an old cedar with a fresh gouge at the base and something tucked into a hollow not just above eye level. At first, I thought it was a rock or a trash wrapper. But when I pulled it out, my heart kicked like a spooked horse. It was Wade's lighter, brass, weather-worn, with the chipped Mormon temple etching on the side. The hinge was still stiff. Smelled faintly like diesel and chewing tobacco. He used to flick it open with one hand like a magician and say, "This old thing'll outlast all of us." And now it was here, hidden in a tree hollow, less than 100 yards from our property line. There's no damn reason it should have been there. Wade would never leave that lighter behind unless he meant to. And he sure as hell wouldn't stash it in a tree out by the fence line unless someone was supposed to find it, someone who knew where to look. The blood drained from my hands. All the stories I'd been told about the slip on the rocks, the blood on the stone, the missing body, they all cracked wide open in that moment. This wasn't just some random discovery. It was a message, he was alive, and he'd been here. The only question now was why he faked his death. And who helped him? I tucked the lighter into my jacket pocket and headed home, the weight of it heavy against my chest. I didn't tell Mama. She looked tired lately, like her soul was stretched too thin. Dad was out with the cattle, probably pretending things were normal. I walked straight to the old hay barn and climbed up into the loft where Wade used to hide his old maps and journals. I pulled the rope latch loose and started digging. If Wade was alive, he didn't run without a plan, and if I knew my uncle, somewhere on some yellowed scrap of paper or carved into a post, he left a breadcrumb trail for someone like me to follow, someone who remembered everything, someone who wasn't afraid to find the truth even if it cut deep, because if Wade wanted to disappear, he should have picked a nephew who didn't know how to track a ghost through dust. The barn was always quieter. After dark. Cows bedded down. Crickets filling the silence. The kind of stillness that makes you feel like the whole world's holding its breath. I'd gone out there that night because I couldn't sleep, not since I found the lighter. I kept thinking maybe I missed something in Wade's old loft stash. Some note. A map. A sign. But all I found were dust-covered beer cans, faded calendars from the 90s, and a rusted-out ammo box full of spent shells and a broken watch. I was about to climb down when I heard the barn door creak open. It was Dad. He didn't know I was up there, tucked into the shadows. He paced the floor below like a caged bull, boots scuffing against the concrete. Then I heard the buzz of his cell phone. "Yeah," he said. His voice was low, tense. "I told you I'd handle it. He's sniffing around too much. Found the lighter." My blood ran cold. "Yeah. The old Zippo. He brought it home," Dad continued. "No, he didn't say nothin'. But I know Colton, he ain't gonna let it go." There was a long pause. He rubbed the back of his neck, something he only did when he was nervous. "No more digging," he snapped. "We buried Wade clean. Paperwork's tight. If the boy starts pulling threads," another pause, "this one heavier, then we've got a problem." I leaned in too hard and knocked a loose board with my boot. The sound cracked through the air like a gunshot. Dad froze. My heart thudded so loud I thought he could hear it from the ground. He glanced around, stepped toward the ladder, then hesitated. The phone still pressed to his ear. He muttered, "I'll call you back," and ended the call. He turned and walked out without a word. I waited 10 whole minutes before I moved. My hands were shaking as I climbed down. Not from fear, at least not the kind you can name. More like everything I thought I knew about my father had just shifted. He knew Wade wasn't dead. He was part of it, part of whatever deal had gone so wrong it required faking a death and lying to everyone, including me. And now I had to ask myself the question that had been floating in my mind since the funeral but I hadn't dared say out loud. What if my uncle wasn't the only one trying to disappear? Maybe Earl wasn't covering for Wade, maybe they were in it together, maybe Wade was just the piece I could still find, and Earl still had something to lose. The photo came from pure chance. I was killing time at the library, using the public computers to dig through real estate transfers and business filings, anything tied to Wade's name or his fake one, if he had one. I wasn't expecting much. But then I stumbled across a blog post from some travel influencer who'd spent a week getting off-grid in central Utah. There, buried halfway down the post, was a photo of a roadside diner in Bicknell. It was meant to be an artsy shot of the neon sign glowing against the dusk sky, but my eyes locked on the glass window just behind it, a reflection. Faint. Blurry, but unmistakable, the long jawline. That old dusty ball cap with the frayed bill. Wade. He was leaning back in a booth, just behind the glass. He didn't look dead. He didn't look hiding either. Just like he always looked when he wanted to be forgotten. I printed the image on the library's black and white printer and stared at it for 10 straight minutes. Then I drove home. Mama was in the kitchen folding dish towels. She looked tired again, like the weight of something invisible had been sitting on her shoulders since the funeral. I walked in, slid the paper across the table without saying a word. She paused mid-fold, then picked it up. Her fingers trembled, her eyes scanned the page, narrowed in on the figure in the glass. I watched the color drain from her face. Her mouth parted slightly, like she might deny it, but she didn't. "Where'd you get this?" She whispered. "Online," I said. 3 days ago. Bicknell. She didn't speak. Didn't sit. Just stared at the photo like it had punched a hole in her chest. "So it's him?" I asked. "He's alive?" She lowered the paper. Her hands dropped to her lap. "Colton. You don't understand." "No, I understand just fine," I snapped. "Y'all lied. Everyone lied. And now he's out there, alive, and you've been sittin' on it like it's nothing." Tears welled in her eyes, but I wasn't in the mood to comfort her. "Your uncle. He made choices. Dangerous ones. He got involved with people men your father told him to stay away from." "Dad knew?" I asked, already knowing the answer. She nodded slowly. "They both knew. But Wade. He dragged your father into something they couldn't walk away from." "What kind of something?" She shook her head, more firmly this time. "I can't say. I promised." I leaned forward. "Promised who, Mama? The man who faked his death or the one still lying to my face?" Her voice cracked. "I promised you'd be kept out of it." I laughed once, bitter. Too late for that. I grabbed the photo off the table and walked out before she could say another word. I didn't need her to tell me everything. Wade was alive. Dad was involved. Mama was complicit. The lies had been stitched together tighter than a branding harness, but every seam has a weak point, and I was done pretending I didn't know where to pull. The name came up in a land record search. W. Thorne, tacked onto a modest acre and a half outside Moab. No house listed. Just utility shed and temporary structure. But it wasn't the land that caught my eye, it was the signature, the loops in the W, the slight slant on the T. I'd seen Wade Thatcher sign a dozen tractor titles and hunting permits. He had this lazy way of dragging the pen like the letters owed him something. I printed the record, then I dug harder. Property taxes were current. All paid in cash. Mailing address? A P.O. box on the edge of town near Spanish Valley. I called the post office and played dumb, said I was trying to send a birthday gift and wanted to make sure the name matched. The clerk said, "Yep. W. Thorne's still renting that box. Been a while though. Quiet guy." W. Thorne, Wade Thatcher, two names, same ghost. I looked up everything I could. Found an old invoice from a hardware store in Blanding made out to the same name, wire fencing, padlocks, propane tanks. A man building something, but keeping it light. Portable. Easy to walk away from if needed, that was Wade's style. No phone plan. No credit cards. No driver's license renewal. Just off-grid enough to be invisible. Unless someone was willing to go digging through the red clay and dust of eastern Utah, which I was, I hit the road the next morning before sunup. Took the old truck with the long-range tank, packed water and jerky, and told Mama I was going to help a friend in Kanab. She didn't question it. I think she knew. The roads narrowed as I passed through Moab and into the outskirts. I kept my eyes peeled for the parcel number I'd memorized. There were no street signs out there. Just crooked fence posts and mailbox clusters half swallowed by sagebrush. Around noon, I found it. A dirt road curled off the highway and led to a clearing surrounded by pinyon pines. No buildings at first glance. Just desert and wind, but then I saw it, a dull green trailer parked back behind a rusted water tank. No plates. No markings. Curtains drawn tight. A solar panel leaning at an angle like it had been knocked loose in a storm. And nailed to a nearby post, fresh barbed wire, strung tight, like someone expected visitors, or wanted to keep them out. I killed the engine and sat there. My fingers tapping the steering wheel, heart hammering. This was it. I'd followed every breadcrumb, every document, every false name, and now I was parked 100 yards from the truth. My uncle wasn't dead, he was just hiding, and the question that burned hottest in my chest wasn't why he ran, it was what he was willing to do to stay gone. The wind howled low across the bluff as I stepped out of the truck. Every bootfall crunching against gravel like it might give me away. The trailer sat crooked on its wheels, paint peeling like sunburnt skin. No dog. No smoke from a stovepipe. But I knew he was in there. Wade never liked dogs, said they were too honest. I walked slow. Hands out, heart thudding so loud it felt like it echoed. My phone was already recording, tucked into my jacket pocket, screen black. Just in case, I knocked once, silence. then the faintest creak of floorboards inside. A shadow moved behind the curtain, a second knock. Firmer. "Wade," I said. "It's me." A pause. The kind that could swallow years. Then, the door unlatched. It opened just enough for me to see him. He looked older. Rougher. Beard gone gray at the edges, skin tanned deep from the sun. But it was Wade. My uncle. "The ghost they buried, Jesus, Colton," he said, voice like rusted wire. "You shouldn't ha' come." "Too late for that," I said, stepping forward. "Mind if I come in?" He hesitated, then opened the door wider. "I guess you earned that much." The inside of the trailer smelled like propane and old sweat. Maps on the table. A rifle leaning by the door. 3 padlocked coolers in the corner. I sat at the little booth where 2 cracked mugs rested. He poured us both stale coffee, and for a second it felt like old times. Until I slid the lighter across the table. "This was in a tree on our land," I said. Wade stared at it, jaw tightening. "You wanted me to find it?" I said, "No," he muttered. "I didn't want anyone to find me." I leaned in. "You faked your death." "Why?" He looked out the window, jaw working. "You don't know what I owed, Colton. There were men out of Vernal, oil guys. I signed leases I shouldn't have, sold mineral rights I didn't fully own. Your daddy warned me." "You forged Mama's signature," I said. He didn't deny it. "I thought if I could just disappear, clean the slate. Your dad could cash out the land, split it, everyone walks away clean." "But I didn't expect you to go diggin'." "You thought I'd believe you drowned?" I asked, voice rising. "You taught me how to swim that river blindfolded." He laughed once, bitter. "You always were too damn sharp." I stood slowly, sliding my hand to the pocket with the phone still recording. "You sold out your own family." "I tried to save it," he said. "In the only way I knew how." I stared him down. "No. You ran." And then I walked out the door. He didn't follow, he never would. I drove straight from Bluff to the Wayne County Sheriff's Office, phone still hot in my pocket with everything Wade had confessed. Every lie, every deal, every stolen signature, it was all there. The deputy at the desk, a guy named Bryson who went to school with my cousin, looked up when I walked in. "Colton," he said, "what brings you in?" I placed the phone on the counter. "I have a recording," I said. "It's about Wade Thatcher." His face stiffened. 5 minutes later, Sheriff Nielsen was playing it back in his office, eyes narrowed, jaw clenched tight. When Wade's voice admitted to faking his death and forging Mama's name, Nielsen paused the audio and looked at me like I'd just handed him a stick of dynamite. "You understand what this is?" he asked. "I do," I said. "It's the truth." They picked up Wade 2 days later at a gas station outside Mexican Hat. He didn't resist. Just nodded when they cuffed him and said, "I figured this was coming." Earl was next. Sheriff Nielsen came out to the ranch himself. Mama stood on the porch as they read Dad his rights. He didn't say a word to her. Didn't say anything to me either, just gave me this hollow look like all the air had been sucked out of him. The charges hit hard: fraud, conspiracy, falsifying legal documents, and interfering with a death investigation. The news spread through Wayne County faster than wildfire. People who'd known my family for generations started whispering behind our backs in church. Some shook my hand and called me brave. Others looked away when I passed them in town. Mama didn't say much those first few days. She just kept boiling water on the stove like it gave her something solid to hold on to. "You did what had to be done," she finally said one night, voice low, eyes red. "Even if it cost us everything." It did feel like everything was gone, but also like something honest had finally taken root. The land, by some miracle, didn't slip away. The forged paperwork made the sale void. We were still broke, but at least we still had the dirt beneath our feet. And me, well, I became the kid who turned in his uncle and exposed his father. Some folks called me a traitor. Others said I'd saved the Thatcher name from being swallowed whole. All I knew was I wasn't carrying their secrets anymore. And when I looked out across the pasture at dusk, I didn't see ghosts hiding behind fences. I saw a stretch of land that still needed fixing. Still needed truth, and I planned to give it both. Mama didn't say goodbye when she left. just packed her life into the old Pontiac she hadn't driven in years and pointed it toward Price, where her sister still had a spare room and fewer memories. She left a note on the counter, "Don't stop telling the truth, even if it hurts." That was it. No hugs. No promises. Just ink and silence. I stood on the porch and watched her taillights fade into the same dust that had swallowed this family whole, and then it was just me, cleaning up after the mess Wade and Earl made. Wasn't like pulling nails from rotten wood, it was like trying to rebuild a house that never had a foundation to begin with. First came the lawyers. Men in pressed suits who drove up from Provo and asked 1,000 questions in air-conditioned tones. They wanted Wade's statement, the original deed, and every scrap of paperwork they could claw from our file cabinet. Then came the county assessor. Turns out, when you fake a death and forge a will, the government doesn't just let it slide. The ranch was under review. The water rights were tangled in litigation. And the oil lease Wade tried to peddle? Illegal and void, but it still triggered a half-dozen liens I had to untangle like fishing line after a storm. Most nights I barely slept. During the day, I worked the land. At night, I fought to keep it. I made copies of everything. Wade's confession. My father's arrest record. I organized documents by hand in the living room, sitting in the same chair where Wade used to drink beer and tell stories that weren't true. But that confession, that recording, became my weapon. I used Wade's own words in court, submitted them to the judge. They proved the will was forged, the sale illegitimate, and the intent criminal. That single audio file, recorded in the heat of bluff, became the thread that kept the whole ranch from unraveling. It wasn't clean. It wasn't quick, but it worked. 6 months later, the judge ruled in my favor. The land stayed with the Thatcher name, but under my control, not my father's. Earl got 2 years in state prison for conspiracy and fraud. Wade got 5, neither of them wrote. Neither of them called. Fine by me, some bloodlines don't need stitching back together. The grass is growing now, slow but steady. Cows are back in the pasture. The fences are upright again. I rebuilt the barn roof myself, plank by plank, like I was nailing down the truth with every swing of the hammer. The ranch doesn't feel cursed anymore, it feels earned, and every morning when I light the stove, I use Wade's old Zippo. Still works. Still stiff at the hinge. But now, when I flick it open, I don't think of the lies, I think of firelight chasing shadows away. Some mornings I still walk the river banks alone, boots sinking in the damp silt. The sound of the Fremont murmuring like it remembers everything I've tried to forget. The sun doesn't rise here, it creeps. Stretches out slow over the ridgeline like it's not sure we deserve light just yet. I walk those same bends Wade used to fish, quiet and sharp-eyed, cigarette dangling from his lip, acting like nothing in the world could ever touch him. Even back then, part of me knew he wasn't made to stay. Some men are built like fence posts, set deep, rooted. Wade was wire, always twisting, slipping through. But that day they said the river took him. I knew it was a lie. You don't drown in water you taught someone else to survive. I've run the ranch myself for nearly a year now. Fixed the fences. Bred the cattle. Balanced the books with my own 2 hands. Folks around town treat me different, like I earned my last name the hard way. And maybe I did, some still whisper when I walk into the diner. That's the Thatcher boy who turned in his own kin. But no one says it to my face. I don't need their approval. I didn't do it for them. I did it because lies rot everything from the inside out. Wade's fake death. Earl's silence. Mama's eyes turned away. They thought secrets could hold up a legacy. But legacies don't come from what you bury. They come from what you dig out. I keep Wade's Zippo in my pocket. Still flick it open every morning when I light the stove. Not because I want to remember him, but because I want to remember the fire that finally burned through all the lies. Sometimes I wonder what'll happen when Wade gets out. Will he come back to Utah? Will he try to reclaim something from the ashes? Part of me hopes he doesn't. The other part almost wants him to, just so I can look him in the eye and say, I told you I'd find you. Earl writes from time to time. Short notes. No return address. Half apologies scrawled on old postcards. I don't answer. Not yet. Maybe someday, maybe not. The river's high today. Snowmelt up in the Henry Mountains is feeding it strong. I sit on a rock Wade used to claim as his thinking spot. The same one they said he slipped on. The irony isn't lost on me. Water moves on. Always does, but some truths cling to the current, refusing to wash away, and as I sit there, watching the sun burn gold across the muddy churn, I realize I've stopped looking over my shoulder. I've told the truth. I've claimed the land. I've faced the ghost. The river never had him, it was the lies that nearly drowned us, and I'm done letting them pull me under. If this story gripped you like it gripped me living through it, go ahead and like, subscribe, and share it with someone who loves a good twist. What would you have done in my shoes? Drop your thoughts in the comments, I want to hear every theory, and remember, sometimes the people closest to you are the ones hiding the darkest truths.